People used to joke that I was the glue holding Hartwell and Crane together. Not because I was the founder. Not because my name was on the door. But because without me, the contracts didn't get signed, the clients didn't get called back, and the quarterly reports didn't get filed on time. My husband Callum laughed the hardest at that joke. He'd put his arm around me at company parties and say, "She's being modest, she's more than glue. She's the whole building." And everyone would laugh, and I would smile, and I believed him. For 11 years, I believed him. My name is Leah Hartwell. I'm 37 years old, and I run the operations division of a mid-size financial consulting firm that my father built from nothing in suburban Columbus, Ohio. I handle client relations, HR, compliance, and anything else that doesn't fall neatly into someone else's job description. Callum was, our director of business development. That's how we met. He came in as a lateral hire 8 years into my father's tenure, and within 6 months, he had charmed every client on our roster and half the staff. Including me, we married 4 years after he joined the firm. My father walked me down the aisle. My mother cried. Callum's vows were the kind of thing people screenshot and send to each other. "I promise to be worthy of you every single day." That's what he said. I still have the video on my phone. I haven't watched it since February. My father had a heart attack on a Wednesday morning in March. He was at his desk when it happened. His assistant Priya found him slumped over a legal pad where he'd been working through some notes on a client restructuring. He was gone before the paramedics arrived. I got the call at 9:47 a.m. I remember exactly because I had just poured my second cup of coffee and was about to sit down for a department check-in. I stood in the kitchen of our house in Bexley for what felt like a very long time. Then I put the cup down, got my keys, and drove to the hospital. Callum met me there. He held me in the parking lot and I cried into his shoulder. He smelled like his usual cedar cologne. He stroked my hair and said the right things. He was very good at saying the right things. The next 2 weeks were arrangements, paperwork, phone calls, and the particular exhaustion that comes from grief you don't have time to actually feel. My father had a will. He had a trust. He had a very meticulous estate attorney named Gordon Platt, who had been handling his affairs for 20 years and who called me on the second Thursday, after the funeral, to say I needed to come in. I didn't think much of it. I assumed it would be property transfers, maybe a conversation about the business succession plan. Dad had always meant to formalize, but never quite got around to. I told Callum I had the meeting. He said he'd come with me if I wanted. I said I'd be fine. I wasn't fine, but not for the reasons I expected. Gordon Platt's office is in a low brick building off 5th Avenue in Columbus, with a small parking lot and a waiting room that smells like old paper and carpet cleaner. His assistant offered me coffee. I said yes, and then didn't touch it. Gordon came in, shook my hand, expressed his condolences, and sat down across from me with a folder that was thicker than I anticipated. My father, he told me, had spent the last 8 years quietly and methodically restructuring his personal assets. The house I grew up in had been transferred into a family trust. Several investment accounts had been consolidated. And there was a separate account, one I hadn't known about, built from decades of careful saving and a few very well-timed investments in the early 2000s. Gordon slid a document across the desk. I looked at the number. I looked at it again. I asked him to say it out loud because I wasn't sure I was reading correctly. He said it clearly. $41 million. I sat with that for a moment. My father, who drove a 2009 Honda Accord and brought his lunch from home every day and complained every year about the cost of the firm's holiday party, had quietly accumulated $41 million and left it to me. "He wanted you protected," Gordon said. He was very specific about that word, protected. I thanked him. I gathered the paperwork he'd prepared for me. I walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, watching people walk in and out of a deli across the street, and I thought about my father eating his packed lunches at his desk for 30 years. I thought about how I was going to tell Callum. I didn't call him from the car. Something made me wait. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe just the size of it. I needed to absorb it myself before I could share it with anyone. I drove home, made myself a sandwich I didn't eat, and sat on the back porch until the sky went orange. That's when I called my best friend, Joanna, instead. Joanna has known me since the 7th grade, and she is constitutionally incapable of pretending things are fine when they aren't. When I told her the number, she was quiet for 3 full seconds, which for Joanna is practically a lifetime. "Leah," she said, "don't tell Callum yet." I asked her why. "I don't know," she said. "Just wait. Give it a few days." I didn't ask her to explain. Joanna's instincts are better than her explanations, and I've learned to trust the instincts. I waited 6 days. On the 7th day, a Tuesday, I had a routine errand that took me past Gordon Platt's office. I needed to drop off a signed form his assistant had called about. I parked, ran in, handed over the envelope. On my way out, Gordon's assistant stopped me. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, or, "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what name you're going by now." I looked at her. "Leah Hartwell," I said, same as always. She looked down at her computer, then back up at me. Her expression had gone careful. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I may have misspoken. Let me get Mr. Platt." Gordon came out to the waiting room. He did not look like a man coming to have a routine Tuesday morning conversation. He looked like a man who had been handed a problem he wasn't sure how to approach. He asked me to come back inside. He pulled up something on his screen. He turned the monitor slightly toward me. He told me, quietly and precisely, that in the course of processing the estate documentation, a standard title search had flagged an inconsistency. My marital status in the county records did not match what either of us had assumed. According to the records, I had been divorced for 4 months. I said, "That's not possible." He said he understood and that he was sorry, and that the records were very clear. A divorce decree had been finalized the previous November. Both parties had signed. The filing was complete. I had not signed anything. I had not known anything. I sat in that chair and I did not speak for. I counted later, thinking about it, probably 8 seconds. Not because I was calculating, because my brain had simply stopped processing and needed a moment to reboot. Then I said, "Can I see the signature?" Gordon printed the page. He set it in front of me, my name, in my handwriting, or something very close to it. The particular loop in the L, the way I joined the E and the A, it was almost right. Not quite, but almost. I looked at it for a long time. Then I folded my hands on the desk, and I asked Gordon Platt to explain to me exactly what the estate implications were given this information. Because if I was technically divorced as of November, then Callum had no legal claim to any portion of what my father had left me. Not as a spouse, not under Ohio law. Gordon confirmed that was correct. I thanked him. I asked him to keep this between us for now. He agreed. I picked up my purse, walked to my car, and sat in the parking lot for a while again. This time I didn't call Joanna. This time I called my father's corporate attorney, a woman named Beverly Sachs, who had been handling the firm's legal affairs for 15 years. I told her what I'd just been told. I asked her if she could recommend someone. She gave me a name. She said she'd make the call herself. The attorney Beverly referred me to was a woman named Harriet Odom. Her office was in Dublin, about 20 minutes from mine. She had short gray hair and the kind of stillness that made you feel like she had heard every possible version of every possible story, and nothing you said was going to surprise her. She was right. I told her everything. I showed her the signature page Gordon had printed for me. She looked at it for about 15 seconds, then set it down. "Your husband has an administrative background," she said. It wasn't quite a question. I said he did. That he handled documents regularly through his role at the firm. She nodded. She told me what she believed had happened. That someone with access to notary contacts and a working knowledge of legal filing procedures had submitted a divorce petition using a forged signature, or possibly a coerced one obtained under false pretenses. She said it wasn't as uncommon as I might think. He would have needed a reason, she said. People don't do this speculatively. There's usually something they're protecting or positioning for. I didn't say anything immediately, but I was already thinking about Callum's behavior over the past year. The late nights that had started appearing in September. The weekend trip to Chicago he'd taken alone in October for a client dinner that stretched to 3 days. The way he'd started asking, casually and then less casually, about my father's estate planning. Whether the firm had a succession plan, whether Dad had ever talked about what would happen to his assets. I had thought he was being thoughtful, planning ahead, being the kind of husband who paid attention. Harriet told me not to confront him. She said it clearly and more than once. "Do not let him know, you know. Not yet. We need time." I told her I understood. I meant it, mostly. I went home that evening and made dinner. Callum came home at 7. He kissed me on the cheek and asked about my day. I said it was fine. He poured himself a glass of wine. We sat at the table we'd bought together at an estate sale in Clintonville 4 years ago. The one with the scratch on the left leg that we'd always meant to fix. And we ate pasta, and I asked him about the Mercer account, and he told me about it. And I nodded, and I thought, who are you? Over the next 2 weeks, Harriet and her team worked quietly. They pulled records. They contacted the notary, whose stamps appeared on the filing. a woman who worked out of a UPS store in Westerville, and who, when contacted, said she had notarized the document, but that both parties had been present. When pressed for a description of the woman she'd notarized, the description she gave did not match me. It matched a woman named Petra Hensley. I didn't know that name. Harriet showed me a LinkedIn profile. Petra Hensley was 31 years old. She worked in marketing. She had dark hair and was approximately my height and general build. She was, and this is the part that sat in my chest like a stone, photographed at a company event, standing next to Callum, both of them smiling. I stared at that photo for a long time. Harriet also found, through a forensic accountant she brought in, that over the previous 14 months, someone had been making transfers from a joint investment account that Callum and I held together. Small amounts initially, then larger ones, totaling, by the time they were finished counting, just under $300,000. All moved to an account I didn't have access to and hadn't known existed. I sat in Harriet's office, and I looked at that number, and I thought about my father, who packed his own lunch for 30 years. And I thought about Callum, who had cried at our wedding. And I thought about the scratch on the leg of our dinner table that we'd always meant to fix. I said to Harriet, "What do we do now?" She said, "We get everything documented, and then we choose the moment." The moment came 3 weeks later. Callum had scheduled a quarterly review meeting with the full leadership team at Hartwell & Crane. 12 people in the conference room. As Director of Business Development, he was presenting the projections for Q3 and Q4. He had slides. He had handouts. He was very prepared. What he didn't know was that Beverly Sachs, our corporate attorney, was also in the building. That Harriet Odom was in the building. That the firm's financial auditor, who had been quietly conducting an internal review at my request, had submitted his findings to me the previous afternoon. I let Callum run his presentation for about 20 minutes. He was good at it. He had always been good at presentations. He had the room. People were nodding. Then I asked if I could add something. He turned to me with an expression of mild surprise and easy confidence. "Of course," he said. I stood up. I told the room that we needed to take a brief detour before we moved into projections. I said that in the course of settling my father's estate, some financial inconsistencies had come to our attention. I said that our auditor had completed a review. I said that Beverly Sachs was present to advise on legal matters. I watched Callum's face in my peripheral vision the entire time. I told the room that approximately $290,000 had been moved out of firm-adjacent accounts over the past 14 months. I told them where it had gone. I told them whose name was on the receiving account. Callum said, "Leah, this isn't the place." I said, "Sit down, Callum." Something in my voice made him sit. I laid out what we had, every transfer, every date, every amount. Beverly had documentation ready. Our auditor had documentation ready. Harriet had documentation ready. I had spent 3 weeks making sure that when this moment came, there was no gap in the record and no room for a counter-narrative. When I finished, the room was very quiet. Callum looked at me the way he looked at clients when he was recalibrating mid-conversation. That slight pause, the search for a new angle. He said, "I think this needs to be handled privately." I said, "The private handling is already done. The investigators have completed their work. What I'm doing now is informing your colleagues." I paused. "And I'm letting you know that I've retained Harriet Odom to finalize the dissolution of our marriage, which, as you know, was already filed in November. You just didn't expect me to find out." Someone in the room made a sound. Callum's expression finally shifted into something real, something unguarded. I can't say exactly what it was, surprise maybe, or the specific kind of fear that comes when someone realizes they have miscalculated badly. "I want to say something," he said. His voice was lower. "You can say whatever you'd like," I told him. "Beverly will advise you on what to say to law enforcement. Harriet will advise you on the divorce proceeding, and HR will schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning regarding your continued employment at the firm." I picked up my folder. "That's all from me," I said. "Let's reschedule the Q3 projections for next week." I won't pretend the months that followed were easy. They weren't. Callum hired an attorney and initially tried to contest the fraud findings. His attorney sent letters. Our attorneys responded. There were several weeks of back and forth that felt like throwing documents into a void and waiting. Harriet kept telling me to let her handle it, and I mostly did. The forged signature on the divorce filing was confirmed by a forensic document examiner. Petra Hensley, when contacted by investigators, initially denied knowing anything, and then, when presented with evidence, said that Callum had told her the signature was a formality, and that I had already agreed to the divorce verbally. I cannot say what she believed or didn't believe. I only know what she did. The criminal filing for fraud and forgery was submitted in June. Callum was formally charged in July. I was not in the courthouse when it happened. I was in my office, doing the work that has always been mine to do. The transfers from our joint account constituted wire fraud in addition to the forgery charge. Callum's personal attorney eventually advised him to cooperate with investigators in exchange for some consideration on the sentencing. I was told this, not consulted about it. That was fine with me. The divorce, the real one that I actually participated in, was finalized in August. On the day the paperwork came through, Joanna came over with a bottle of good wine and 2 glasses, and we sat on the back porch, the same way we've been sitting on various back porches since we were 17 years old. The same sky going orange. The same Joanna, who has always known things before she can explain them. I'm glad I listened to you, I told her, she said. I'm glad you listened to me too. We stayed out until it got cold. We talked about things that had nothing to do with Callum, or the money, or the firm. We talked about Joanna's daughter's soccer season, and a book she'd been reading, and a trip she was thinking about taking. Ordinary things. The kind of things that are still there when everything else has been swept away. My father's estate settled in September. The full amount was transferred into a trust structure that Gordon Platt and Beverly Sachs spent about 6 weeks carefully constructing to ensure it was properly protected and properly managed. $41 million, in my name, under a structure my father had spent years thinking about. He had known, I think, that I would need it to be protected. He just hadn't known from what. I still run Hartwell and Crane. I changed the operational structure after the audit, added an additional layer of financial oversight, and brought in a new director of business development, a woman named Suzanne, who came from a competitor firm, and who, 3 months in, has already doubled our lead pipeline. The team has adjusted. Companies do. Priya, my father's assistant, still works at the front desk. She keeps a photo of him by her monitor. Sometimes I stop by in the morning and we have coffee and don't talk about him directly, just around him the way you do with someone who's become part of the building. I still eat lunch at my desk most days. I started packing it from home. Some things you inherit without knowing you're inheriting them. Your father's stubbornness, his capacity to wait, his understanding is sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is make sure they're protected, even before they know they'll need to be. He spent 30 years building something quietly, without asking for recognition, without making noise. He did it so that when the moment came, it would be there. I think about that a lot. The patience of it. The faith that the moment would come and that I would know what to do when it did. I'd like to think I did.